a budgeting system that changed my entire financial life. I used to think budgeting was something people did when they were already successful. People with organized desks, clean kitchens, retirement accounts. The kind of people who woke up at 5:30 in the morning to drink black coffee and read finance books before work. I wasn't one of those people. At 26 years old, my financial life looked normal from the outside. I had a decent apartment, a reliable car, a full-time job in marketing, and enough money to go out on weekends without checking my bank account every 5 minutes. But beneath that surface, everything was fragile. Every month felt like survival disguised as stability. I was making just enough money to stay distracted. The first warning sign came on a rainy Thursday afternoon. I remember sitting in my car outside a grocery store, staring at my banking app with the air conditioning running because I didn't want to go home yet. My paycheck had hit 5 days earlier, and somehow I already had less than $200 left in checking. I didn't understand how it kept happening. I wasn't gambling. I wasn't buying luxury watches. I wasn't flying to Dubai every month. But little by little, my money disappeared like water leaking through cracks I couldn't see. Coffee every morning. Food delivery because I was too tired to cook. Streaming subscriptions I forgot existed. Random Amazon purchases that gave me 10 seconds of excitement and weeks of regret. One night I opened my credit card statement and realized I had spent over $900 in a single month on eating out. $900. That number sat in my chest like a stone. I remember laughing when I saw it, not because it was funny, but because it felt absurd. I had been telling myself for years that I was bad with money. Yet the evidence was sitting right in front of me. I was terrible with it. The worst part wasn't the spending itself. It was the constant anxiety, the low-level panic that followed me everywhere. Every notification from my bank felt dangerous. Every unexpected expense felt catastrophic. Every conversation about money made me defensive. Friends would talk about investing or buying homes, and I'd pretend not to care. But secretly, I felt like I was falling behind in a race everyone else understood except me. One Sunday afternoon, my older brother came over to help me move a couch into my apartment. After we finished, we sat on the floor eating cheap pizza because I still didn't own a dining table. At some point, he casually asked how things were going financially. I gave him the usual answer. You know, hanging in there. He looked at me for a second longer than normal. Then he asked a question that changed everything. How much money do you have right now? I immediately became defensive. What do you mean? In total, he said calmly, checking, savings, everything. I pulled out my phone. I had $312, that was it. I had been working full-time for years and only had $312 to my name. He didn't judge me. That almost made it worse. Instead, he nodded slowly and said, "You don't have a money problem, you have a system problem." At the time, I thought that sounded like motivational nonsense. But he explained something I had never truly understood before. Most people treat money emotionally. They spend based on stress, boredom, excitement, insecurity, or convenience. Then they hope things somehow work out by the end of the month. That had been my entire strategy for adulthood. Hope. My brother told me something simple. If your money doesn't have a job, it disappears. That sentence stayed in my head for days. A week later, he came back over with a notebook. Not an app, not a spreadsheet. A plain black notebook. He drew 4 boxes across 2 pages. Needs, future, freedom, fun. That's it, he said. That's the system? That's the system. I expected something more complicated, some advanced financial framework with percentages and investment terminology I wouldn't understand. Instead, he explained it like this. Every dollar that enters your life should immediately be assigned to one of 4 categories. Needs covered survival. Rent. Utilities, groceries, transportation. Future covered long-term protection, savings, emergency fund, investing, debt payments, freedom covered life improvement, education, skills, business ideas, health, fun covered enjoyment, entertainment, eating out, trips, hobbies. Then he said something that completely changed the way I viewed money. Most people spend first and save what's left. Wealthy people save first and spend what's left. Simple, obvious, and somehow revolutionary to me. That night I went through 3 months of bank statements. I wish I could say it was inspiring. It was horrifying. I saw patterns I had ignored for years. I spent money whenever I felt stressed. I ordered food whenever I felt lonely. I bought random things online whenever I felt unproductive. My spending habits weren't financial decisions. They were emotional reactions. For the first time in my life, I stopped asking, "Can I afford this?" and started asking, "Why am I buying this?" That question changed everything. The next payday, I tried the system. The moment my paycheck arrived, I divided it. Needs, future, freedom. Fun, no guessing, no improvising, no emotional decisions. For the first time ever, my money had structure. The first month felt terrible. I won't lie about that. Budgeting exposed habits I didn't want to confront. I realized how addicted I was to convenience, how often I used spending as entertainment, how much of my identity was built around looking financially comfortable while secretly feeling unstable. There were moments I wanted to quit, especially when friends invited me out, especially when social media convinced me everyone else was living a better life, especially when budgeting made me feel restricted instead of free. But then something strange happened. Around the second month, my anxiety started decreasing. Not because I suddenly became rich, but because I finally knew where my money was going. Clarity is powerful. Even painful clarity feels better than confusion. I started cooking at home more often. At first, it was purely about saving money. But eventually, I realized something deeper. Cooking slowed my life down. Instead of constantly consuming, I was creating something. That small shift changed more than my bank account. I stopped impulse shopping by using a 24-hour rule. If I wanted something that wasn't essential, I had to wait one full day before buying it. Almost every unnecessary purchase disappeared after that. Turns out, most cravings expire when emotion fades. One evening, I opened my banking app and realized I had crossed $1,000 in savings for the first time in years. It wasn't a huge amount, but emotionally it felt enormous. That money represented safety, breathing room, proof that I was changing. I remember staring at the screen for several minutes, not because of the number itself, but because it symbolized something bigger. For the first time in my adult life, I trusted myself financially. That feeling is difficult to explain to someone who has never experienced constant money anxiety. It felt like walking out of a noisy room I didn't realize I had been trapped inside. Months passed. The system became automatic. Every paycheck followed the same process. Needs, future, freedom, fun. I no longer viewed budgeting as punishment. I viewed it as direction. Before the system, money controlled me emotionally. After the system, money became a tool, a quiet one, a disciplined one, a purposeful one. The biggest surprise wasn't how much money I saved. It was how much my personality changed. Financial chaos had made me impatient, reactive, easily stressed, ashamed. But stability changed the way I moved through the world. I slept better. I stopped avoiding bank notifications. I became more confident during conversations. I even started performing better at work because my brain wasn't constantly overloaded with financial fear. One afternoon, my manager called me into her office. Normally, those meetings made me nervous, but this time felt different. She offered me a promotion, not because budgeting magically transformed my career overnight, but because I had transformed. Discipline in one area of life tends to spread into others. That promotion increased my income significantly. And for the first time, I didn't immediately increase my lifestyle. That was new for me. Old me would have celebrated with expensive purchases and bigger monthly expenses. Instead, I increased the future category first. Savings, investments, security. That decision accelerated everything. Within a year, I paid off my credit card debt. I still remember making the final payment. I sat quietly afterward, almost confused by the feeling. No fireworks, no dramatic celebration, just relief, pure relief. Debt had been silently draining energy from my life for years. When it disappeared, I felt lighter, not richer, lighter. People often think financial transformation happens through dramatic moments, winning the lottery, launching a successful company, making six figures overnight. But real financial change usually happens quietly, one disciplined decision at a time, one ordinary day at a time. One repeated habit at a time. The budgeting system didn't make me wealthy overnight. It made me aware, and awareness changed everything. I started noticing how consumer culture profits from emotional instability. Advertisements constantly try to convince people that discomfort should immediately be solved through spending. Sad, buy something. Bored. Order food, stressed. Upgrade your lifestyle, lonely. Shop online. Modern life trains people to consume emotionally. Budgeting interrupted that cycle for me. It forced me to pause before acting, to think before reacting, to separate wants from impulses. A year and a half after starting the system, I had 6 months of emergency savings. That number once felt impossible. Now it existed quietly in an account I rarely touched. The presence of that money changed how I experienced life. I no longer feared small emergencies. Car repairs didn't destroy me emotionally. Unexpected expenses stopped feeling like personal attacks from the universe. Security creates psychological peace that people rarely talk about. One evening, I visited my parents for dinner. Afterward, my dad and I sat outside while the sun disappeared behind the trees. At some point, he asked how work was going. I told him things were good. Then, almost casually, I mentioned that I had become serious about budgeting. He smiled in a way I'll never forget. "Took me 40 years to learn that," he said. That sentence hit me harder than he probably realized, because I suddenly understood something important. Financial literacy changes generations. Nobody had taught my parents these things when they were young. They survived through hard work and sacrifice, not financial education. But survival and strategy are different things. That realization made me grateful instead of ashamed. I stopped viewing my past financial mistakes as proof of failure. I started viewing them as evidence of ignorance, and ignorance can be corrected. Around that time, some friends started noticing changes in me, not flashy changes, subtle ones. I stopped complaining about money constantly. I stopped panicking over small expenses. I stopped pretending to be richer than I actually was. One friend asked me how I suddenly became good with money. I laughed because I still didn't feel like an expert. I simply had a system. That's when I realized something most people misunderstand about financial success. It's rarely about intelligence. It's usually about consistency. There are brilliant people drowning in financial chaos, and ordinary people quietly building stable lives through discipline. The system worked because it reduced decision fatigue. I no longer negotiated with myself every day. The rules already existed. Money came in. Money got assigned. End of story. Simple systems survive difficult emotions. Complicated systems collapse under stress. That lesson extended far beyond budgeting. Years later, I still use variations of the same framework. Needs, future, freedom. Fun, the categories evolved as my life changed, but the philosophy stayed the same. Give money purpose before life gives it distractions. Eventually, I moved into a better apartment. Not because I wanted to impress anyone, because I could genuinely afford it without anxiety. That distinction matters. Financial peace isn't about buying nothing. It's about buying without fear. One of the most meaningful moments happened unexpectedly. A close friend lost his job during a difficult period. A few years earlier, I wouldn't have been able to help anyone financially. I barely survived on my own. But because of the stability I had built, I was able to help him cover part of his rent temporarily. Not enough to change his entire life, but enough to help him breathe. Afterward, I sat alone in my apartment thinking about how strange life is. Money itself had not changed my life. Control had, discipline had, awareness had. The budgeting system was never really about dollars. It was about identity. Before the system, I saw myself as someone who was always trying to catch up. Someone slightly behind, someone financially disorganized. But repeated disciplined actions slowly created a new identity. I became someone who plans, someone who prepares, someone who thinks long-term, and identity shapes behavior more powerfully than motivation ever will. There's a misconception that budgeting removes freedom. In reality, the absence of budgeting removes freedom. Chaos is expensive. Impulsiveness is expensive. Emotional spending is expensive. Structure creates options. The older I get, the more I realize financial peace might be one of the most underrated forms of happiness. Not luxury, not status, peace. The ability to sleep without financial panic. The ability to handle emergencies calmly. The ability to make decisions based on values instead of desperation. That kind of stability changes your entire relationship with life. Sometimes I think back to that rainy afternoon in the grocery store parking lot. The version of me staring at his bank account with anxiety in his chest. At the time, I thought I needed more money, but what I really needed was a better system. More income helps. Of course it does. But without structure, higher income often just creates bigger chaos. I've seen people making enormous salaries living paycheck to paycheck. And I've seen ordinary people quietly building freedom through discipline. Money amplifies habits, that's all. If your habits are chaotic, more money increases the chaos. If your habits are intentional, more money increases stability. The budgeting system didn't make me perfect. I still make mistakes. I still overspend sometimes. I still battle impulse decisions occasionally, but the difference is that now I notice it quickly. I recover quickly. I adjust quickly. Because systems create resilience. That's the hidden power most people never talk about. Near the end of every month, I still sit down quietly and review my finances. Not because I'm obsessed with money, because I respect clarity. There's something calming about knowing exactly where you stand in life. No pretending, no avoidance, no confusion, just truth. And strangely enough, truth feels lighter than denial. If someone asked me today what changed my financial life, they might expect some complicated answer. Investing strategies, business opportunities, advanced financial knowledge. But honestly, everything changed when I stopped treating money emotionally and started treating it intentionally. That's it. A simple system, 4 categories, repeated consistently over time. Nothing glamorous, nothing viral, nothing dramatic, just discipline practiced quietly until it became identity. And maybe that's what real transformation usually looks like. Not a single breakthrough moment, but small decisions repeated long enough that eventually, one day, you look around and realize your entire life has changed.